Hello YCW students and welcome to the project video for Unit Form, which is relating to a lot of miscellaneous things, but mostly forms, right? So you did look at forms a bit, you looked at linear gradients, you looked at how to incorporate them. So right now, what I want you to do is I'm not going to make you create a completely new project, but I want you to learn how to build off your own projects. So if you remember, this was my Singing Monsters multi-page website where I showcased, different monsters, different islands. I showed you how to embed videos, add cool hover links in the nav bar, and now you might also notice that we have a fourth link right here called Monster Survey. Right now, if you click on Monster Survey, I just copy pasted what's at home, right? But we're going to delete that and we're going to start to create our own form. I am not going to be styling the form too much because I want you to do that with your prior knowledge. If you have any questions, please ask us. But I know that it might be confusing on how to format your form, so that's what this project video will be about. Okay, so let's get right into the code. So as you can see here, I deleted all the information. I changed the title, a monster survey. Take this survey in order for us to decide what people like the best. So that's what surveys are usually for. They're used for websites to collect data on certain things, but you can also do cool things with them later. And you might be wondering, how do we take in the name and the email, and what can we do with them? Can we send them responses and stuff like that? That's going to be covered all in the next unit, which is related to JavaScript. It's pretty complex, so we're not going to teach it now, but we are going to teach you how to create the HTML for this form. Now this should already be familiar to you, so let's look at the code. First thing is I'm going to kind of format it by having a form subheading, and it's going to be general information. And then our general inputs, we're going to be using an input type text. So this is a text box, right? We have a label right here for name, right? And what the name is we are basically saying, what do we want this label to be linked to? We want it to be linked to the input with the ID of name, okay? So don't get confused by this, right? Like for example here, for email, ID email. Now, what is name used for? Well, name is something that's used to access answers in JavaScript, so don't worry about that. But you still need to write it because you're going to be using it later next unit. So remember, we're going to build off this for a couple of units, and then we're going to transition into maybe other projects. Okay. So right now we have the name and the email. As you can see, you can type your name right here in your email. Okay, and then I'm gonna split them up by line break. So you see how I already set up a line break right here, and then last video, or the last project video, I styled the line break a bit. So I'm gonna just line break each section. Okay, so this should be obvious enough. Let's get to the more complex parts of a form. Okay, so now we have the islands subheading right here, or group. And the first question I ask is, and remember I didn't style any of this, I do expect you to style it, okay? Which island do you like the best? So in My Singing Monsters, there's a whole bunch of islands where the monsters play different tunes. And so I've embedded 3 videos right here using display inline block. And then I have a drop-down menu, and I can select specific islands that I want to, that I feel like is the best out of the 3. Okay, so let's look into the code. It looks a bit intimidating, but when I split it up for you, it should be easy. So we have our subheading, and now we're going to have a label, and we're going to link it to the fave island question. Which island do you like the best? Okay, then I have a div class iframe list, and the styling for that is really easy. All I did was I used display inline block, and then I spaced it out a bit, and then I have 3 iframes that are a bit smaller than usual, and you can change them using the width and the height property. So this should be kind of obvious. Okay, now this is how you make a drop down list. Okay, so we have the ID of fave island and the name of fave island, which you should have. And then the option is basically what happens when you drop down the list. What are the options? The value is basically what it's equal to. So in JavaScript, when you take the value, it's going to be like plant, air, or earth. But what they see is plant island, air island, and earth island. Okay, so make like the value like a short form version of like what's actually here. Okay, so that's pretty easy. Let's get on to the next part, which I feel like is pretty cool actually. Okay, so as you can see here, I have another question. This time I didn't add a line break because it's still within the island theme. So on a scale of 1 to 10, how interested would you be in an island that is lightning themed with dubstep sound effects? Okay, if you don't get what this is saying, don't worry about it. All you need to know is that we have on a scale of 1 to 10, and you can see how there's actually like 10 steps. Okay, now I'm going to show you a few cool properties you can mess with. Okay, so let's get to the HTML. We have a label for the Lightning Island. We have a few break tags, and then this is the cool part, which is range, input type range. And there's a lot of different types of things you can use in forms. If you want to know, you can go to W3 schools and then say like W3 schools input type. So you can use that in order to learn about different types of inputs. Okay, right now we're going to use a range. So this is a bit weird, but basically this has no tag, 0 and 10, because these are like the end and start points of our range. Okay, so its ID is Lightning Island, and then the min and max is basically when, let's say we don't have this step, right? I'll explain what that does later. Let's reload the page. Reload the page. So the default value is it's going by ones, right? Right? So this would be like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, all the way till 10. If I made this like 20, you can see how it goes by a very small step, like half the step, because there's actually 20 steps instead of 10, right? So this would actually be like 20, right? If you made this like 50, it would basically, the steps would be invisible. But what step does is it allows us to choose by what steps they can go at. So the default is 1, but let's say we want to go by 2 steps. Okay, so they can only choose 0, 2, 4, 6, 8, and 10. If you reload the page, this should be the case. 0, 2, 4, 6, 8, 10. Pretty cool. So let's just keep this at step 1. And honestly, if you have a step of 1, you really don't need this, but I just want to show you what step does. And then min and max. You can make the min 5 even, and it would still work. Okay? And that's what range is. Now let's finally get, let's look at the last question. Okay, so as you can see here, we have a new line break. So now we have monsters instead of islands, and we just have one question. Which of these monsters would you like to see more information about? Bogwar, T-Rox, or Clamel, and these are all monsters in the game, and we can checkbox them. We can choose how many we want. Let's say we don't like any of these, right? We don't want any information about any of these, then we don't have to check any of them. And this is called the checkbox. So let's look at the code. So right now we have our label, and then I have a div, right, which we haven't seen in a while right now. Class checkbox elements. Now I don't do anything in the styling for this, but the reason I made a div is it's kind of a hint. Right here you see how this isn't like lined up properly. Well, there's a way you can do that with the styling, but I want you guys to figure it out because you know, it's a nice challenge. But if you're not sure, you can ask us. But the clue is you want to put this all into a div. Okay? And it's also just for, you know, it makes it look a lot nicer. Oh, this is the checkbox. And within the checkbox, each input, right, which is just this check right here, right? This is the input type checkbox. It has an ID of, you know, a special ID, Bogwar, T-Rox, Clamble, whatever. But you might notice that the name is the same. That's because when we're using JavaScript later on, we need to somehow link these checkboxes together to know, oh, this is for one question, right? And the way to do that is give it the same name for each checkbox. But remember, every single element can only have a unique ID. Like you can't have two elements with the same ID, or else that would bring up an error, or it would just be a problem, right? And then this for is actually supposed to be for, the ID. So this is supposed to be like for Bogwart. This is supposed to be for T-Rocks. Then finally, this is supposed to be for Clamble. And yeah, that's basically how you do checkboxes. Now, the final thing we're missing right here is a submit button. So let's take a look at that. We finally have our submit button here. Thanks for taking our survey. And we have a submit button and a clear all button. So the submit button, basically, it doesn't do anything yet, right? But later on, when we start using JavaScript, it will do something. But right now, let's enter in stuff, Air Island. Okay, submit button doesn't do anything. I'm just going to say that right now, but later on it will, so we'll keep it. The clear all button, this is really interesting. It completely resets all fields. So right here, it brings everything back to its original state, which is actually pretty helpful. So let's take a look at how we can do this. So here's our H3, right? And then we have our input type submit, and then the value submit. Okay, so the value is what is showing right here, like submit and clear all. And then the type is basically submit and reset. So reset is the type that basically says, okay, when this is clicked, we're going to clear all of we're going to reset everything back to its original state. And then the type submit, basically it has other like things like the action equals property, but these properties we're not going to focus on right now. And this is how you can create an HTML for a form. But don't be worried if this doesn't do anything yet, because we will cover how to take user input with JavaScript. Okay, so for now, just create like the HTML for it, and that's what this Unit4 is for. Maybe like experiment with linear gradients, change your website using linear gradients. That's my other challenge for you. Then once you're done with that, you can move on to Unit5. I hope you guys enjoy this video, and I can't wait to see your updated websites.